Hi everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. On today's episode, we're going to take the lilac issue and see if we can figure it out. So on one of my most recent episodes where I did some updating, I showed the lilac trees, and we've got some browning of the leaves. They're looking like they got some kind of fungus issue going on. I'm not sure why. This was the clump style I repotted this spring. This is actually one I just put to the side of my house because our neighbor wanted a lilac, and I said, well, I'll just keep one until you need it. And they were going to move. Then I'm not sure if they're going to move or not, or if they're going to put this in their yard, but I've been keeping it. And if it turned out to anything that I could use as a bonsai, if they didn't want it, I'd keep it. But it's showing some of the same signs. Now, the two trees with me right now are the two trees that have been in the most shade throughout the day. We'll get to that in a little bit. And the other one I have on the bench is getting the full sun all day spot. And even though those leaves don't look as perky as they usually do, they're a little bit more matte finish to them, a little bit less glossy. Not that lilac leaves are glossy per se, but they're just a little bit more dingy than normal. But these two trees, which are getting the more shade, are having the issue. Not sure what that's all about. So one of my viewers, who's also part of the Minnesota Bonsai Society, wrote to me and said, hey, check this out. So the University of Minnesota Extension program provides some great education for all of us people trying to grow things in Minnesota and the upper Midwest, and perhaps in your region, wherever you are. The extension link to this article is in the description, and I'll go ahead and make sure I highlight that for you so you can go check that out yourself. So that'll be in the description. And so there's some kind of fungus going on in Minnesota with lilac trees, and so some people have been writing in. And now these are mainly with the common lilac. Now there's a different amount of lilacs out there. There's a Korean lilac tree that has multiple trunks, typically grows to about 10 feet or so. There's Little Miss Kim lilacs, right? Japanese lilacs. There's all kinds of different lilacs out there, but your basic everyday run-of-the-mill lilac is what I've been working with. Well, because they were in my backyard. And so I checked this article out. I'm going to share you a little bit of the information. Now, I in no way am a horticulturist. I am no way talking with expertise in this at all, but just sharing what I found through a viewer and one of my MBS members, thanks to Jumi, and the University of Minnesota Extension program, okay? So I've got a cheat sheet here because I'll never remember how to pronounce some of the words and all that. So as I show you some footage of the leaves of the trees and what's going on, I will talk about what I found out through the extension services. After 2020, that year in August, people started knowing some fungus, kind of mold, mildew, fungusy issue on their leaves. And the signs were leaves going yellow and then brown and then falling off. Now, my leaves have not really shown much yellow, but they've gone more to a straight brown. But there's a couple things we'll mention here that talk about, leaves going brown, falling off, and then what are the recommendations and what can we do about that? Again, symptoms might be leaves turning yellow, then brown, and then dropping off. There's branch dieback too that's random. You could have it on one shrub or in the middle of a shrub or the edge of a hedge, one side or all another side. So very sporadic dieback. So what could cause these issues, whatever this issue exactly might be? In 2020, in May, there was a very cold spell in Minnesota without any snow cover that lasted for a while. But then July was the 14th warmest and wettest on record since 1895. So after that cold snap in May, we had a really warm July and wet and high dew point. Dew points in the 70s many, many days in a row. And did that cause some of this fungus to develop, and then now it's sticking around. Storms can also cause some damage on trees, can invite pests. Insects, of course, causing some issues with our plants as well. So it's hard to really pinpoint what exactly is causing this with these trees. Fungus could be the issue. So this is what I'm leaning on and how I'm going to treat my trees here in my backyard. So lilac pseudocercospora. Well, that was a pretty good first effort, huh? I'll put it up on the screen for you. Leaf spot. Presents in some tests of the University of Minnesota. So the University of Minnesota has tested some of these fungus lilacs that were given to them, and that's what they're calling it. Again, lilac Pseudocerocaspora leaf spot. Symptoms similar to what I mentioned above, right, with the yellow, brown, falling off leaves and random dieback. The plant disease clinic emphasized sanitation. So when I cut these leaves off today, I've already started before I started filming, but as I cut more leaves off here to take out the bad stuff, whatever falls into my pot, we want to get rid of that and throw that away and take care of it so it doesn't stick around, go into the soil, and create fungus for next year. So there's one of your first tips as you're taking off some of the old death on the tree from the fungus possibly, to throw away that stuff, right? Don't let that sit around and create more infestation of the fungus, right? So clean up all the fallen leaves that you're cutting down to reduce infection for the next year. And the other thing they recommend is utilizing what they called renewal pruning, which for us is kind of like defoliation. When we defoliate trees in the summertime on some of our older species, every once in a while, sometimes every year, every third year, it depends upon the species, we'll cut off the bigger leaves in hopes that we're going to get smaller leaves, right? That also lets more sunlight in, lets the tree breathe a lot better. So if you have a big bushy tree that's overcrowded, or like on my benches with all my trees super close together, I gotta watch out for that and spread those out, let the airflow go through, let the sunlight come in, and then you can avoid a lot of the fungus issues. So for the renewal pruning, here's what they recommend. Again, allowing more light through the older plant. Remember, the new plants are gonna require at least 2 to 3 years before you'll see any buds, and I have not seen flowers on these trees at all yet since I took them out of the ground, but as far as a normal hedge. The older bushes can get large tree-like shapes, and sometimes the large tree-like shape will shade out the lower stuff, and that can create some more interesting situation with the fungus as well. So we want to prune to kind of open up the tree a little bit more and maybe not have it quite so saturated with leaves. And that's really all they recommend. You can take lilacs generally and chop them down right at the ground, and there's so much growth down below and suckers that come up and new bud that grows on when you cut and chop a tree that's a lilac. You chop it, it's going to grow all of these bushes right. See, this was chopped completely. You can see all my chop points, and all of this shot up the next year, right? So you can chop down your tree and kind of start over, right? Just make sure the sanitation is there. You're getting rid of all those fallen leaves and branches, cleaning up the area, and sanitizing your tools, right? And hopefully you'll have some luck with your lilac. There's also a lilac borer, and there's sometimes herbicide or herbicide damage could create problems with your lilacs. Well, I use organic fertilizers, and I don't use chemical pesticides at this point either. So I'm using stuff like neem oil and real soft, sensitive stuff that might not be getting rid of all my bugs if I have them. A different topic for a different show. But herbicidal issues and lilac borer could also create some of the problems. But again, today we're sticking with fungus. And so we're sticking with what we're going to do with these trees right now. Now what I'm going to do here is continue to take off the leaves that I believe are infected. And all the leaves are falling into my pot. And so I'm just essentially defoliating this lilac. Even though it's pretty sparse this year, didn't get a lot of extended growth. The leaves are nice and small, but again, it kind of stalled out on me. Now we've had an up and down spring/summer. People joke that we had about 4 days of spring, and then went right into some heat. And now these leaves all here, none of them have any brown on there. So I'm not going to cut all of these off. I'm going to cut off a couple of ones right here. And we'll just leave the rest for right now. As I come to this side, I didn't get one down here. And as I cut away, I've cut a couple of branches along the way, some of my stubs. And there's green cambium. So there's also some back here. What I'm going to try here is to go ahead and to defoliate all the infected pieces of this particular lilac tree. And I already treated it with neem oil once. After the last show that I talked about putting some neem oil on, I waited till it cooled off and I put some neem oil on, let it sit for about a half an hour. And again, my neem oil recipe is at 40-1 plus a little dish soap. Now, the same person who came in and asked me or told me about the Minnesota Extension program talked about how just your basic neem oil might not be as effective effective as if you use some of the other harsher chemicals. Now, as a general rule of thumb, I am trying to stay away from chemicals as much as possible. I'm trying to be as organic and natural. Some people may say if you're spending a lot of time and eventually, or at times, a lot of money on these plants, and nothing's going to kill it but the harsh chemicals, what are you going to do then? I haven't crossed that bridge yet. This lilac tree was free of charge. It came from my backyard, and I'm doing lots of experiments with it. If I learn that a technique is not working, I need to go to that next level, I will again consult with a lot of my veteran Minnesota Bonsai Society members who have used some of these chemicals, get their thoughts on it. And I know I've already had a couple of people respond to some of my Facebook group posts with questions of a couple pictures of trees. And they, of course, are suggesting some of the higher chemical warfare, I guess, on the plant. And I understand that. And I'm not here to say what's right or wrong. I'm just going to share what I'm doing. And each can take their own path, of course. And so I'm thinning out, and some of these branches on here don't necessarily need me to thin out too much because they're still green. There's no fungus or no brown on some of these leaves. So maybe the neem oil application will keep it at bay, but maybe it won't. It's too early to tell that, of course. But I'm just going to cut the rest of these leaves off that I feel have that brown on there. And maybe even a couple of inside leaves and branches that don't, just for basic pruning ideas. And we'll allow more light to get through here. And as I clean up the leaves, I find all the old pruning spots that I can go ahead and chop off those to make them a little bit more cleaned up. I think we have it where I want it. Oh, let's take care of this one right here. Let's get rid of that one right there. I think I'm at a stopping point with this tree. This is the one I'm most concerned about. The one in the other tray for the neighbor, that might not even go anywhere someday. But let's take a peek at the bottom of the pot, okay? So as mentioned before, we should get rid of all of these leaves. Now if I just throw these into the garden, there's a good chance that the fungus will stick around. It could go into the ground. And next year, if the conditions are ripe, perhaps I get a whole nother infestation of a different kind on trees that are around my bonsai trees. And then it spreads to the bonsai trees with the wind, right? And so make sure if you're performing this defoliation on a tree that you suspect has a fungus on it, rather than it just was dry and brittle, if you know for certain that it's dry and brittle, perhaps you don't have to worry about it. But if you're unsure like I am, I'm going to go ahead and pick up all of these pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and throw them away into my safe spot where they're away from all the trees. So, just another tip there for you, regardless of what the fungus might be, a good idea to clean off your clippings in case there's anything going on. Take care of your tree by making sure you get rid of all the possible negative aspects of what's going on. I got the tree in the big pot all pruned up. So one of the other recommendations through the Extension Services of Minnesota talked about getting this thing into full sun for at least 6.5 hours a day. So where it was before was not a spot that was getting 6.5 hours of sun, maybe 3 hours of sun. So I'm hoping as I take this out today and put it in some full sun, that'll be something else that'll help this lilac tree. Now I'm in the shade because it's a warm day. It's very, very bright and sunny. I thought this would be a little bit easier to show you. This one is not in a pot yet. I'm going to be a little bit more bold with my cuts. And I'm actually going to cut a lot of branches down to where there's no leaves. And again, I'm going to leave all the pieces parts. This is kind of like a summer prune where we're going to cut back, and I'm just going to not do leaf by leaf, because if this tree does not survive, I'm not so worried about it, because I don't know if I will keep it as a bonsai or if the neighbor's going to end up taking it. And I'd rather give them a healthy tree, so I'm going to cut off all this unhealthy stuff. And then we have other spots on these branches where the buds look like they want to grow, and we'll hope for a new tree. And some of these I can just do this as well. I can pull them off this way. And we'll see what's gonna grow out next. This one I cut way back to there. Cut this stump off. Let's get this one down to there. Cut that one down to there. So now we have a couple of scraggly branches, no leaves on this one, a summer defoliation. It's a tree, again, that I don't have a lot of sentimental value to at the moment, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick up all of these leaves, and then we're going to get these trees out into the sun to see if that can be a part of our healing process. The sun is just about to go under a cloud, but when it's bright out, you wouldn't be able to see my face. It would be so overexposed if I kept the aperture open, but I'm going to go back into the dark now under the tree and retrieve the trees. This one I can still manage without a dolly, so I'm picking this one up and we'll head over to the other benches. I'm doing my best to avoid the plants we want to keep. This is much easier on the back. So while the sun is still behind the clouds, I gotta figure out where we're gonna put this beast. Now it's a taller one, so I probably shouldn't put it here. We'll leave the transplanted rhubarb, but let's put this maybe back over in this corner right here. I don't want to go too close to the garden beds because we want to be able to go through and pick our tomatoes, so I have to be a little bit careful of where I place this. The lilac tree on the bench right there in the corner is the one that doesn't have any of the brown spots on it. The leaves just look a little bit dingier, but that's been in the sun. Now we have our tree in place. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that all my cut points, I do see a cambium layer. So the tree's got life in it. We're hoping everything's going to be really good, and we'll get some new buds here in the middle of summer into the fall and let it push out a whole bunch of growth for next year. We have all the bad leaves cut off. We disposed of the bad leaves. Now we're just going to let sun, and it also said in the extensions to make sure you're giving it plenty of water. So, with Milo saying hi, I think we're going to wrap up our lilac work. We're going to keep our eye on that one. We'll keep our eye on these two new ones out into the sun now for the first time in several weeks. And as always, we'll keep our fingers crossed, all right? Hey, take care of you, take care of your bonsai, and we're going to catch you very soon on the next one. Good luck with any of your trees that might have fungal issues. All right, bye now.